Board of Health. I do not have coronavirus. I had self-reported myself to my physician because I had contact with people who had been in hotspots, and I lack 2 of the 5 necessary conditions to qualify. So it's just a bad cold, but again, I want to apologize to anyone who was concerned when I had that coughing fit.
Well, we appreciate your being overly cautious, so thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay. So it is Friday the 13th, unfortunately, at 9 o'clock, and we are here for a special meeting of the Mayor and City Council to talk about the coronavirus and some other things that are very time sensitive for the city government. So the first item on the agenda, and hopefully, Bonnie, you did get a copy of the agenda, I believe, correct?
I did, yes.
Okay. The first item on the agenda is a presentation of possible action on recommendations from the Lewes Board of Health. And the way that reads is the Lewes Board of Health recommends the Mayor and City Council discourage public gatherings in the city of more than 200 people. That the Mayor and City Council encourage people to stay home if they're not feeling well. And that the Mayor and City Council approve a liberal leave policy modeled after that being considered by the town of Georgetown. I believe we did circulate the policy from Georgetown, yes, and everybody has it.
Bonnie, if you don't have it, I did upload it to iCompass this morning, so
okay.
It is available on iCompass.
All right.
But to give you the condensed version, even less than the Cliff Notes version, basically it encourages employees to stay home if they're not feeling well, and it does indicate that if an employee contracts the virus, or they're caring for someone who has a virus, there was a liberal leave policy and will not be charged against their sick leave.
For 14 days.
For 14 days. So, and that's where they are. I think that I was in D.C. with Gene Dvorak, and he shared that with me. I forwarded it to Anne Marie, which is how the Board of Health was made aware of it. I think it's a very good policy, well written by their city solicitor, and I'd open it up for discussion from members of council as to how you feel about our adopting that policy. We can talk about the other components that were made that were part of the recommendation, the 200 people and the staying home and all that. But let's talk about the policy in terms of leave, because that affects our staff immediately, and I want our staff to feel as secure as we can possibly make them.
I do have just one question. There are 2 parts to the policy. One is if they're feeling ill or have a sickness, they stay home. Mm-hmm. The other part is if they have the virus, then they are on paid, penalized sick, non-deductible leave.
Yes.
But if they're just not feeling well and they don't come in, do they count that on their sick leave, or are we going to be more liberal? I think we need to be clear so that.
Sure. Good point, Fred.
To encourage people, if they have any sort of illness, to encourage them not to come in, and then we're going to charge their sick leave. I wonder if the policy needs to be for the next 4 weeks, let's say, that if they're ill, feeling bad, they don't come in, we won't charge their sick leave. It's a question.
I have, Fred, same question. I think it could be a little bit clearer about what is non-chargeable sick time.
Okay.
It may be that it means exactly what it says, that people who are required to stay home, even though they haven't met these conditions, will not be given non-chargeable sick time.
Right.
So there's a paragraph that says, employees who have symptoms of respiratory illness must stay home. And let's say that has nothing to do with coronavirus.
Right.
They get charged.
You know, so I'm inclined, if we're telling people to stay home if they have a respiratory illness, I'm inclined to not charge the sick time.
I am too.
Because again, I don't want to put people in a position where they might have a low balance and they make a decision to come in.
Right. I think we err on the side of being liberal with this process.
I
I agree.
Okay.
So I think we need to change paragraph C a little bit.
I would suggest perhaps that we put a time limit on this and then we can reconsider. We could say for the next 4 weeks or for the next two through the end of April, this would be the policy. If we could put some, and then we can reconsider.
This has 60 days,
Yeah, it has 60 days in the policy.
so, I mean, we can make it 45 since we're being a little more liberal.
Okay, why don't we go with the end of the July, April 30th, if that's okay with everybody?
Through April 30th.
Okay,
Yeah.
And Anne Marie, I think there's an easy fix to paragraph C, which now says employees will not be required to use their accrued sick leave or vacation time should they be required to be quarantined as a result of exposure to or complications from coronavirus. I think we could say, should they be required to not come to work as a result of this policy?
Okay.
okay, that's fine. Thank you, Rob. Good edit. All right, is there?
I don't have a copy. Is 14 days, is that with pay?
Yes.
Yeah, it's,
Okay.
yeah. All right, Bonnie, do you have anything you want to add to this?
The only thing I wanted to
Thank you.
Sure, Rob.
adding
Have it.
to the,
I got one.
to the policy itself, but that there's been some reporting, and I don't know if it's accurate or not, but some reporting that, that the period during which someone remains in a potential, potentially infectious to others is actually more than 14 days. I know that's been the period of self-quarantine that has been discussed, but my only point is that we have to make sure we keep up on what the science is and amend the policy if it turns out that, the 14-day policy, the 14-day quarantine is not sufficiently
Understood.
long.
I think that's good. Last night, I don't know whether you saw the Anderson Cooper interview, but they were saying that no one can be assured that they're over the virus until they've had 2 consecutive tests, more than 24 hours apart, that are negative.
Yeah.
And so, given the non-availability of testing, it's going to be hard for anybody to feel really assured that they are over the virus. The other thing that isn't known is what is the possibility of becoming reinfected?
Right.
So both.
Yeah,
of-
I mean,
so there's that.
the other thing that's usually a concern in these kinds of open-ended policies is the potential for abuse, and I think it is a tribute to our staff that we're not worried about that as a potential. I know everyone is going to be responsible and do what it takes and stay out of the public if they are worried or if they're caring for someone. But I'm not worried that the business of the city of Lewes will continue.
Okay.
Given our loyal staff.
Okay, well, I think we can get these amendments out today.
No, can I just, as it relates to
Okay, go ahead, please.
possibilities of amending the policy, do we want to add language that would allow the policy to be administratively
Absolutely.
amended as
As required.
information,
Yes.
as required by,
Additional information.
and I, obviously, if we administratively change it, we're going to share it with you, and if anybody has a problem, obviously.
Should we say administratively amended by the city manager?
Okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Yes, Press?
You said up to
Would you come up here, Press, because having been on the line the other day listening to it, if somebody speaks from the back of that room, I can't hear it.
It doesn't come through on the streaming.
Okay. I just want clarification. Up to 14 days, or what are you saying about the 14 days?
We're saying
I
14
wasn't
days
clear.
right now.
Up to 14 days.
Correct.
Right,
Liberal leave.
that we will not charge up to 14 days of leave.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Do you have a copy of it?
here, Press, I've got an extra copy right here.
I've got an edited copy.
Okay, well, you got an edited copy, that's even better. Thank
I
you.
didn't include the administrative amendment part.
Okay. All right, Tom?
Yeah, just one potential item on the 14 days.
Right.
Should it be maybe 14 days or as long as the person is infected? Because, I mean, a lot of the medical results are inconclusive.
Right.
And if you wind up in the hospital with advanced respiratory,
Sure. I think the amendment that was suggested by Rob with the administrative ability for Anne Marie or the city manager in this case to be able to make a determination, I think gives that latitude at this point.
Yeah.
as
Tom, it says in here that the employees will be afforded their regular wages for up to 14 workdays to recover from any exposure. Should a time period greater than 14 days be required, the employee shall notify their supervisor and the city manager immediately. Each case greater than 14 days will be handled on a case-by-case basis. So
I
there
think
there is
we-
that parachute in there to cover that.
I think
but
that's covered.
Good point.
Okay, good, all right. So, all right, so that one, I think I think everybody's comfortable with the amendments
Yes.
we've talked about. And
I am.
Anne Marie, or Janine, you've got that information down, thank you. So let's talk a little bit more about the recommendation of gatherings of 200 or more. I've seen everything from 50, and last night there was something that was put out that by another city that said that for individuals over 60, they were recommending that groups be limited to no more than 10. Knowing that our population is largely of over 60, I'm looking around this room, there aren't too
So
many
is city council.
there aren't too many people in this room that are under 60. Please hold your hand up, never mind. But I think 200 is a very large number.
Too large, yeah.
And I'm wondering if you all want to consider amending that or making recommendations that public gatherings of a certain size, and I would entertain suggestions from the table.
The governor had a number of 100.
Correct, the governor's policy
Yeah.
says 100, I think we certainly go to there, but do we want to be more restrictive?
Harvard, if you recall, and I've got the
Right.
Harvard site up right now. I've got the Harvard site up right now, and what Harvard is saying is, we strongly discourage any non-essential meetings or events of 25 people or more. Again, I think there's more present, and they're saying through April 30th, and so this is their campus restrictions. I don't know if that's more restrictive than we want to be, but certainly,
We can do this for ourselves in city government. We can't really, we can encourage private individuals and private organizations to do this, but we're not in a position where we can mandate it at this point. So I think coming up with something more restrictive than 200 is certainly prudent.
So do I. Certainly agree with
And
that.
what's a threshold that you all might be comfortable
I want to
with?
keep in mind, I think that whatever we recommend is going to impact the churches.
Of course.
But I look at my own church, and they'll have maybe 150, and probably 70% are
Over 60?
over 60. So it just seems to me, though, that we would be prudent to, while I think the mayor could mandate, but we've not declared an emergency.
Not yet.
I think we would be wise to advise gatherings of a lesser size than 200, and probably no more than 100 if we
I think less than 100.
Okay, well, the governor is recommending 100 in his current policy, which may be revised later this afternoon when he has his conference call. But do you want to stick with 100, or do you want to go smaller?
Mayor, I'm not clear
I think
on why we
smaller.
would have different policy than the state.
Only if we want to do something more restrictive.
Okay. I might note, by the way, that, speaking of church restrictions, the Episcopal Church in Delaware has banned all meetings, all in-person services.
and Maryland and DC as well.
Yeah.
Really?
Well, I think the Episcopal Church was ground zero with what happened in Georgetown, DC on
Right.
Tuesday, so,
Forgotten that.
yeah, so,
St. Peter's sent out an email, all services and every gathering at the church is now canceled until March 28th.
okay. So, do we want to go with 100, or do we want to do something smaller? This is, again, a recommendation. We are going to come back and talk about what city's going to do in a few minutes, but I can tell you that, Rob, you know this probably better than anybody, that Osher's canceled all their classes. The two events that were being sponsored by the History Book Festival have both been canceled. And I had a conversation with Hugh Leahy this morning. The library is having a meeting right now to talk about how they're going to go forward. So there's a lot going on. I think all we're doing at this point is providing guidance to the community, and I think certainly sticking, at minimum, I think we go to the governor's standards. If we want to do something more than that, we should identify what that is, and we can put it out to the public.
Okay, we can also,
Go ahead, Barney.
can you hear me?
Yes, you're good.
Okay.
You're even squeaking.
Sorry, I've been putting it on mute so you don't have to listen to me cough. We could also say something, since this is guidance, we could say, whether we leave it at 100 or knock it down a little bit, which I personally think we should do, but we could put in something saying, that, I mean, there's a big difference between attending, say, a little soccer game, right, where you have the ability to spread out, where you might hit a numeric limit, and being in the library or in church.
Correct.
So we might want to put some language in there, that that sponsors of events should carefully consider the vulnerability of the likely attending audience and the physical circumstances under which the meeting will be held.
I think that's an excellent idea.
As to whether or not it will facilitate or deter infection.
Okay. I think we can, something to that effect, I think we can incorporate, that every organization should evaluate the vulnerability of their attendance, their possible attendance audience, and modify accordingly. Is that acceptable to people?
Well, my
So-
concern is that whatever number we pick is a bit arbitrary.
Of course.
We don't have any basis for setting a number, and the most protective is to say, we shouldn't have large gatherings of any size, but 100's still fairly large, and,
For this community, that's a large group.
yeah.
I mean, if we want to stay with this, that we endorse the state policy, or that we accept the state policy, but encourage individual organizations to evaluate the vulnerability and make plans accordingly.
And just remember, the state policy is heavily influenced by the state's public health
Right.
professionals. So there is some
Background.
science behind that, or some logic. Well, right. I mean, but we know that the governor is taking advice from.
Well, Dr. Rattay, Carol Rattay, who's in charge of this, she's been working on this
Yes.
for weeks.
And
along
Dr. Walker as well.
Along with Dr. Walker. So I think, I would propose, and somebody needs to make a motion to this so that we go with the state policy of 100, but add the clause, something to the effect of evaluate the vulnerability of a prospective audience.
I would just suggest that we say, that we adopt the state policy as it may be amended from time to
Correct.
time.
Good point, Rob.
I would maybe, if we could put a clause in there to say that we would also urge that the room, the gathering place be large enough to accommodate sufficient space between
Right.
people, rather than crowding people into a room.
Rather than tightly packing.
That concerns me. I mean,
Sure.
you can put 100 people in a 300 capacity room, and that's one thing, but put 100 people in a 75.
Put 100 people in here, we're going to be packed in.
Well, if you put 100 people in Cape Penelope High School auditorium, it's
Yeah,
going to be like a
you're good.
a drop in the water,
Yeah.
drop in the bucket. But we'll get to you in just a minute, Tom. I mean, to give you an illustration of how cautious the state park system is being, they have canceled the Kite Festival. That's an outdoor event, but it does draw hundreds of people. They've, on the erring on the side of caution, they've canceled the Kite Festival. So, anyway, Tim, you had a comment you wanted to make?
And just for the record, it's Tim Ritzer.
Tim Ritzer,
We have a new
RITZ,
person doing
yeah.
minutes, so.
Thank you. I'll spell the name for you later. I was just going to comment on the idea that your recommendations be tailored to the space where the gathering would be held. It's what you had just
Right.
touched on. And for example, this room here, I've attended many meetings here where it is standing room only. We've had standing room only at the Rollins Center as well. And when you think about that, we don't want that kind of experience during this critical period.
Correct.
So I think it's about the idea, instead of a finite number, it should be scalable, or it should be a reflection of the scale of the room. So
Well,
some percentage of
Yeah,
whatever that room is.
I think
What's the capacity here?
45,
I'm sorry?
45 at the
45?
chairs, plus
Yeah.
whatever we have up here.
Well, maybe no more than 16 people in this room at a, in the
Right.
audience at a time.
And so I think, like Ted said, we have, this is a recommendation for organizations in the city. So I think that if you can add those qualitative things to help them make the judgment call, what we're going to do for the city is going to be addressed on the next agenda item.
Okay.
So,
Okay, I just got an email
Thank you.
or a text message from Betsy. She said the Kite Festival has not been canceled. She's apparently listening. So Betsy, thank you very much. Because I heard that yesterday from what I thought was a very reliable source. So if you have any additional information, text me more, Betsy. So
So the streaming is working?
the streaming
we
is
have a
working.
call-in show going here.
And Betsy's in Florida, so it's working even in Florida, so there you go. Anyway, so if she has more, we'll hear, and I'll share whatever she sends, okay? So the Kite Festival's still on. Nick Roth, if you're on, don't put that in the Cape Gazette. Anyway, I think we've got the gist of what everybody's concern is. So it's vulnerability of the audience, the size of the space where it's being held, and each organization should make their own decision and notify their potential audience accordingly. Okay?
You need we've got a motion.
Well, let's go on and talk about, the other thing that was mentioned by the Board of Health was encourage people to stay home if they're not feeling well. And I think that goes without saying. We're encouraging anybody to stay home that doesn't feel well or feels like they've been exposed. And if you're coming back from overseas, there's a real possibility you'll be quarantined, so somewhere along the way. So if I think we could deal with this whole presentation as a motion to approve the changes to the Georgetown policy and make it ours, and the changes that we have about gathering of events. Are we comfortable saying 100, reducing this number to 100, or just?
Well, whatever the state,
Okay,
we would abide by the state.
fine,
So
okay.
that if the governor changes it.
Yeah, okay.
And Ted, I'm sorry, but the third piece of this, which you just read out, I didn't quite catch that.
Basically, that we encourage people to, abide by their own self-awareness.
Great.
That they to act accordingly. If they're feeling ill, that they stay home or self-quarantine.
Great.
Okay?
And that's not to supersede the written policy that we've adopted
Right.
Yeah.
for city staff.
For ci- right.
City staff
This is
is
just-
governed by that.
General population.
Great.
Okay? So we have a motion, well, you guys,
I would move that the city manager has heard the general gist of the motion, and that she would write it up in accordance with the comments and wishes of the city council.
Right. More importantly, Janine has heard it, and
Okay.
and she's got it down, but yes,
Yeah.
we will craft that.
so here's the latest from Betsy. She spoke to Pat Cooper at State Parks yesterday, and they are going to continue to evaluate the Kite Festival. No decision has been made yet.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Betsy. Okay, so we have a motion from Fred. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
I,
thank you, Beth. All right. Okay, so that's unanimous. Okay, moving on to B2 is presentation of possible action regarding precautions to contain the virus.
By the way, I'm sorry, point of order,
Yes.
Mayor. I heard Councilperson Osler vote, and I think that's great.
Yep.
I assume that that's in accord with our procedure.
It is, well, it's in accordance with the governor's recommendation.
Great.
Okay? The governor said that his goal was to make sure that meetings could go on electronically.
Great.
Okay, so we're covered there, okay? All right, so staff recommends the mayor and council,
Can I,
okay.
given the text style of the meeting, Chief, you can come to the microphone if you want, but I think that the chief has raised a good point to me, that as it relates to the policy, and this is, I don't think it needs to be written in the policy, I think it's going to be part of our communication. If somebody is sick and under the policy and not being charged sick leave,
Yes.
they're expected to stay home.
Oh, they're expected to be
It's a,
self-quarantined.
it's a small town. If we see you in the restaurants, if we see you out shopping, you know, I mean, again, we just need to make sure that people understand that that's the expectation and that abuse won't be tolerated. Again, I think to Bonnie's point, we don't expect it to be abused, but I think that the chief does make a good point that.
Yeah.
And here's a point I just don't know. Does this apply to the police department, or do you have your separate policies?
It will apply to the police department, and, I mean, and this is, so there are a series of meetings today, and following those meetings, I will be meeting with the department heads, and we're going to be talking about these very issues from an operational standpoint, because, again, want to make sure there's no abuse, but also we have the expectation that we need to be able to deliver a basic level of service. So,
Well, it raises an interesting question, because it came up at the NLC conference. We were talking about what happens if our EMS staff gets infected with the virus, and all 18 of the paid employees have to go into a self-quarantine. Glenn Marshall was at the meeting the other day and said that Suscom has backup service available. Chief, are we working with the state police or anybody else in terms of that?
Mike, got to come to the mic.
Come to the mic, yeah.
We're
we can.
streaming.
Sorry, actually, I started a conversation with BB Hospital this morning in reference to their incident command center. It's going to be up today. I have a meeting with Frank Molino, their director, right after. As far as the state police, I have not yet, but I certainly will.
Okay.
You know, state of emergency for us is business as usual, you know.
Right.
But should we have several cases, yeah, we would certainly need help, and that help comes unquestioned by any agency that we would request it
I would
from.
think so, but just to reassure the public, I think it's important that they're aware that you're making those contacts.
Yep, absolutely.
And working on a plan.
Yep.
Okay.
Chief, would it make any sense to talk also with DRBA, since they've got several
Sure.
certified officers right there?
Yep.
And DENREC as well, actually, because the state park police are certified officers, so.
Yep.
They're close, they are very limited in staffing.
Right.
But DRBA and state would be our best options,
Great.
which we will take care of today.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's important that our public feel secure in every aspect of personal security as well as relating to the illness.
And I think that we also then need to recognize that if, for instance, Milton or Georgetown or one of our other neighboring departments gets hit hard and has officers out of commission, we
have to
may be
help.
asked to assist as well, and I
Maybe.
think that's kind of what you do in this type of circumstance.
Okay. All right, well, then I think we can move on to item B2. You go with that, Anne Marie?
Yep.
Okay. So the item B2 reads, the staff recommends that the mayor and city council cancel all City of Lewes public meetings through April 10th, including the mayor and council meeting scheduled for March 16th, and the mayor and city council delegate to the city manager the authority to determine when and if City Hall should close in the future due to the virus, and/or if the work from home option should be employed for essential city business. I think this we're seeing a lot of the neighboring communities do something similar to this. I think Rehoboth and Dewey have canceled their city council meetings. Yesterday, Anne Marie and I met with Dr. Marvel and Nancy Powell, members of the Board of Health, and people who attended the meeting. And I think we looked at the regular meetings, regardless of whether it's the Planning Commission or the Parks and Rec or Pedestrian Safety Committee, and we felt that all of this business is very important, but the health is more important, and the health of the community. So I think this is a good recommendation. I know it jams up some things, and we're going to have a very busy meeting when we get when we go back to things, but I would open it up for discussion amongst the four of you as to what your thoughts are.
Can I add a couple of things?
Please.
So I did talk late yesterday afternoon with Sharon Lynn in Rehoboth. And what Rehoboth has done is, so the recommendation I put to you says April 10th. I'll give you the rationale for that. It doesn't mean that we immediately resume business as usual. our next scheduled council meeting is April 13th. My concern is that if we do not, if we put a date further out than that, that people will automatically assume that the council meeting is canceled, and there may be a reason to hold it. You know, what Rehoboth has done is they have canceled all meetings until further notice, which we could do that. They will hold their council meeting next Friday, and they will not allow the public to attend. However, they will allow the public to, they will stream it. Now, they have video streaming as well, but, and they're condensing the agenda, but kind of similar to us, they need to get their budget adopted, and they are planning to adopt the budget next week. So, that's the most detail I have from any towns. The other thing, you know, I was talking to press and Darren, Tom, and Austin yesterday, and I mean, I think there's benefit to the city and the board kind of being on the same page, and there was discussion about, and maybe it's not today, maybe this is under the authority to change something later. There was discussion about potentially closing our public-facing operation and continuing to do the work, the back office work. It's a little more challenging for us because we have building permits, we have voter registration, we have things. We could turn those things to by appointment only. So I think we need to evaluate. I don't think we're ready, but if it's part of that, you know, we can make that determination administratively. You know, again, we need to make sure that we can continue the basic functions that we provide, but we do want to minimize, to the degree we can, the number of people just coming to City Hall for things that aren't necessary.
And I think it's, for the benefit of those who are not in the audience or who are listening, I think it's important to note that we have already posted on the entrances to City Hall, asking people to avoid coming in if they could possibly do whatever kind of business they're trying to do via the internet or through a telephone call. So I think we've already done some things proactively to discourage people from just coming in.
And that same notice is posted on our website. It's posted now.
Okay, Janelle, thank you very much for your efforts in getting that done yesterday. So I think, you know, we're already trying to do some things to limit, and I think one of the challenges for us is, unlike some other communities where everybody's working on a laptop and they can take it home, our systems are not such that they can do that. So
we can't even get into our accounting system remotely. So in a few months we'll be able to, but right now we can't. So I mean, there's a benefit to being here, but again, we also want to make sure that we don't, you know.
I think one of the things, I think it's a good idea about doing the April 10th idea from the standpoint of we may feel secure enough that we could do a regular city council meeting without public attendance and live stream it on the 13th, but still cancel all the other meetings.
Right.
You know, if we feel that it's still prudent.
Well, and just the other thing is, under the charter, one of the things that you were supposed to do at your April council meeting is you were supposed to accept the slate of candidates.
Right.
So I don't know, I mean, it's really a formality, but it's in the charter, so I don't know what not meeting on the 13th and not accepting your slate of candidates does for the election.
Yeah. So I think we need to plan, if at all possible, unless something happens that prevents it, we will move forward with having a meeting on the 13th.
Okay.
So,
And I would go a little bit further than that. I mean,
Okay.
I agree with canceling all public meetings of everybody else.
Except the Board of Health, actually.
Except
Except Board of
yeah.
Health, and obviously we can't cancel the Board of Public Works, and because everybody recommends to us anyway, they don't make independent
Right.
decisions. With the possible exception of H Park. But they won't have deadlines, I think, that are
Well, and in my discussions with both Glenn Mandalis and Max Walton, they believe that any business that is postponed is entirely defensible given the circumstances.
Okay. But I do think that the council ought to continue to make itself available for meeting by, in person or by streaming. We have a council person online right now.
Yeah.
And I think that as long as we abide by the rules but figure in person is discouraged.
Right, and that, and, you know, I know I had a detailed discussion with the mayor and with Councilperson Buffet, and actually a detailed discussion with Councilperson Osler about this too. You know, we do, council has a role in just the basic governance of the city. So we do need to be sensitive to, there may be times that we need to bring council together. And, you know, we can't just stop functioning. So I agree, I think there may be special meetings that arise, and then we need to see what we do to make that work.
Comply with the rules so far as they're consistent with health considerations, like notice, for instance.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if the Board of Health comes up with a recommendation that we need to approve, then obviously we're going to have a meeting.
Right.
Okay.
The mayor, my concern,
Just to echo,
even about.
Wait a minute, Aunt Bonnie's.
Oh,
got
okay,
something.
Bonnie, go ahead.
okay, thank you. Just to echo these points, I think we're all sort of saying the same thing, which is the normal sort of rhythm of meetings for now is necessarily disrupted. But in the event that action is required, the city council, I mean, the Board of Health obviously being an exception, but in the event that conditions require, you know, the citizens should be aware that meetings could be held, and they should just, you know, keep an eye on it. But yeah, I mean, with that carve out, and hopefully, you know, I agree with the idea of putting a date certain on this, because I think it helps everybody to focus. But you know, hopefully this will only be for, you know, a month, and then we'll get back to a regular rhythm. But for now, I think we have to take extraordinary precautions.
I understand it, but my concern, maybe concern is not, not the right word, but the governor in his state of emergency guidelines has given us the opportunity to do just what we're doing today. And that is to stream, to accept text messages, to respond to them. And when we cancel Mayor and City Council meeting this coming Monday, it does impact some other people that may be waiting for decisions. I would urge that we not cancel Monday's meeting, but maybe look at the agenda, and those things that impact other people we could take up, and those that are not critical issues we could not. Just for example, the Fisher's Cove. Whatever decision we make is going to impact the developer, the community, and the developer may want time to react or to plan. So I just wonder if there's not a way that we could have a modified mayor and council meeting on Monday. No public coming into the room, but we do it all electronically or through the website. So I worry sometimes that if we just kind of shut down, what impact we will have on other people and their business. So.
Wait, just a minute, Tim.
I appreciate your concerns, Fred, but Fisher's Cove is such a important meeting that to exclude the participants in that decision, I think the impact on the community might be a negative, that they don't have an opportunity to be here and enter into any discussion or observation.
But we're not going to be
I'm a little
taking-
concerned about that part
Yeah,
of
but
it.
we're not going to be taking public input.
I know, but
on
there's
that.
still, there's something about being in the meeting.
Well, I understand, but, you know, I've made my comment.
Okay.
We deal with it.
Rob, do you have any comments?
I would agree with Dennis.
Okay.
But subject to legal advice on,
And I think that Anne Marie got legal advice yesterday from Max, is that correct?
Max actually had recommended that we cancel,
okay,
so.
Okay,
I agree with Dennis.
okay.
And, yeah, I mean, I think because of the current situation, the sense is that, you know, we're doing what we need to do for the greater public health.
Right. Bonnie, did you have a comment?
Yeah, my comment is, I understand what Fred is saying, but, I just think that, first of all, it's important to set an example here, and that is trying things. When it comes to Fisher's Cove, I agree with him, it's a matter of public interest. However, the council is not under any timelines, I don't think, in the code, and I don't think we have to move forward. And I think that it is important that those who are interested in this issue have an ability to observe their council at work.
Okay.
And you can't do that streaming.
Okay, we're not there yet. All right, Tim, you had a comment you wanted to make, or are you okay?
I'm great.
Okay,
You've done it.
okay. Tom, Panetta?
One question. I was rereading the governor's note, and under bullet 5, it talks about allowing electronic meetings, but it says that the public has to be able to contemporaneously speak.
And ask
And-
questions.
And
That's
we
what
don't,
Bonnie
and we
said.
don't have that.
Well,
We
yeah,
don't have that
I-
capability.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, I mean, because it's going to affect us in our discussion coming up, you know, how we comply with that.
Well, so, I mean, what we did, when I sent this meeting out today, and obviously we didn't tell the public they couldn't come, we encouraged people to listen. I did put my email out there so that if people have comments that they want to make or questions that they wanted to share, that it's coming in. So I think, you know, it may be something that we need to talk a little more in detail with legal counsel. But I do think, I know, like in Rehoboth, the fact that they're streaming and there was nothing that required public input on their agenda. They weren't going to put anything on their agenda that required public input. That's how they're handling
That
it.
speaks to, you know, choosing anything that's going to be on the agenda.
Right.
Like the one you were just talking about, that if the public can't.
Well, at this point, the public record's closed. We're not.
I understand.
So,
I don't want to even discuss it, so.
Right, right, and I get that, but I think that I think that the concern that you've heard from some members of council is even though the public can't participate, they want to see.
They want to be part here and observe.
Now,
Okay.
just as an example, but anything that was like that where the public, you would expect input from the public, we probably need to look at the way the policy's written. Or
Yeah.
All right,
That's a very
thanks.
interesting point, but I think you've handled it, Emery, by saying we're not, or if we follow Rehoboth's example, we won't have anything on our agenda that allows public input.
Right,
Yeah, or requires.
and, you know,
Yeah,
and I think it also means we just need to be very selective in what we put on the agenda, because there are many, many things that come before you that under state law and local code don't require public input, but as a body, Lewes City Council has always been very open to that ongoing dialogue. So I think that there's the legal side of it, and then there's the other side of it is, you know, that it's the essential things that need to be done, that you're not excluding the public from something that they want to participate in and that you would normally let them participate in.
Mayor, may I also bring up, there's part of this that you spoke about, no public facing of ordinary city tasks, I thought I heard you say.
Possibility down the road.
And as you pointed out, that would affect registration, voting itself, if it goes that far. So I think we need to be very careful about it.
Right,
And you mentioned building permits,
right.
so there's.
Right, and quite honestly, the economy's already taking enough of a hit. We don't, I mean,
We don't need
I
to
do
do
think we
anything
need to
further.
exercise some caution in that regard as well.
Okay. All right, so I think if there's any more discussion at the table, or anyone in the audience wants to comment, otherwise I would entertain a motion to go ahead with the staff recommendations as they are laid out, recognizing the discussion that's happened here.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Before we move on to
Yes,
the
please.
next, I do want to just make a couple of comments about our staff and how awesome they are. And I've said this multiple times, if you had told me early in this week that we'd be deep in coronavirus discussion, I would have laughed it off. And I think this situation has evolved very quickly, and it has really kind of thrown the entire workload into a little bit of a tailspin, and we have had, all of our staff have really stepped up. Janine's here taking minutes. You've got, Janelle has been posting stuff on the website, and our staff has really been pulling together. Ellen Lorraine made sure that we got the budget ready and balanced so that you guys could act on it today. Christine has been wonderful, because earlier this week, I did not know how to stream a meeting, and with Christine's help and reading directions, Christine and I have been able to figure it out and get it up and running, and now we're going to have, just this week alone, 3 streamed meetings. Sue Ann has been, well, you all know how wonderful Sue Ann is, and she has really kind of kept things on track in the city manager's office, making sure that all the i's are dotted and t's are crossed, and that things don't fall through the cracks while we're otherwise focused. So I just think it's important to recognize that even in just the few days of the chaos, our staff has really risen to the occasion, and I want to thank everybody.
Thank you.
Mayor, I think that's terrific that Anne Marie said that, and I think we might include her in that.
Absolutely. You think? No, I think, actually, the whole staff has come together, and it has been a very rapidly evolving situation. And having attended the National League of Cities Conference earlier this week, this is even from Monday morning when they had the first meeting until we left at noon on Wednesday or 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the tenor of the whole thing turned. And there were numerous people who came and spoke to that group. And we, many of us who were there from Delaware, spent Wednesday morning meeting with Senator Carper and Senator Coons and Lisa Blunt Rochester, and they were echoing the same kinds of concerns. But they're still going about the people's business, and I was shocked when I walked to the Capitol on Wednesday morning to get in. Usually there's a line of several hundred people waiting to get into the Capitol, and there was just a trickle. And then if you read yesterday, the Capitol and the White House are now canceling all tours, so the visitor centers in both locations are now closed. But as of Wednesday, they were still trying to go about business as normal. So nationwide, this has been something that has evolved in less than 4 days, or 5 days, in terms of the urgency of the problem. So I commend everybody on the staff here, and we're not out of this yet. But I think the actions we're taking this morning and the actions we will take in the next several days will help us deal with it. And I know that's the goal of the governor as well, so, as well as the president. So, okay, I think we could move on then to the budget. We have been working on this budget for some time. And I think after our last meeting, we pretty much figured out through some changes how to come to a balanced budget, and I'd ask Anne Marie or Ellen Lorraine to walk us through the changes we authorized or agreed to at the last meeting, and then we can go from there. Okay? Thank you.
So yes, you should have in front of you a final budget that we're asking to seek adoption for. And on the front page lists the changes that were made since our last meeting, March 6th. And so I can go through those with you. At the beginning, there is on page 5, an adjustment to seasonal street wages. And that is where we are proposing to reduce the staff originally at 6 down to 5. And so those are the savings in that expense line. Going along with that is the additional change in the payroll tax because of the line above. And the next few lines that say health insurance, we are not anticipating an increase in the premiums in July as we had previously thought. We are getting some feedback that the potential for an increase would be October, if at all. So we wanted to be conservative and at least put in an increase from October through the end of March of 2021. So you're going to see a savings of those line items to pull back on the 5% increase from July to October. The other item is going to be on page 13, account 100-540-5490. It was discussed that we move the tennis court project to the transfer tax fund, so that reduced expenditures by $73,550. In total, the reduction in expenditures was $96,150. That equated to the balance that we had in draft 4 on line item 100-499 of $96,150. So we are not pulling from reserves in this proposed budget.
And the capital budget, to what extent will that pull from reserves?
So further down, we are showing some changes to the 1 1/2% transfer tax fund. This is showing on page 25, account 460-590-5475. We are increasing as a result of the tennis court project getting moved to this fund. So that increased expenditures of $73,550. At our last meeting, we talked about the boardwalk project down at Canal Front Park. We had budgeted previously $200,000 as an expense. We're finding that project is going to be more extensive. So we reduced the budget, but we did leave in an amount to cover any engineering analysis that would need to be done to move that project forward. So we are leaving $25,000 of the original $200,000 in that fund.
And the effect is to defer the actual construction to the
Yes.
following fiscal year.
Until we have more information.
Well, I'm not sure that necessarily the following fiscal year, but we would come back, if we're to go forward this year, we would come back with an amended budget to accommodate it.
Right.
Or to consider possible moving ahead, okay?
I think it's probably in everybody's minds that our projection of transfer tax revenues may be high, given what we're seeing in the economy.
So there's a couple things. One, we do have a very healthy reserves in our transfer tax fund, so it's not going to, even if we take a little more out of reserves, if it doesn't come in as anticipated, we should be okay. The other thing is, I think there's a number of things. We're going to have to monitor the economy very closely, and there may be other amendments to the budget we need to bring forward. We have the transfer tax, building permits I'm not worried about because that assisted living facility is going to come in. But the other big two line items that, depending on how the coronavirus plays out and whether or not it hits us in our tourist season, is we've got our gross receipts rental,
Right.
or gross, right.
The GRRT.
GRRT, and we have our parking.
Right.
So if come June, July and August, we're still in a, stay home, and people aren't going to the beach and they're not shopping downtown and they're not eating at restaurants, it's bad for our local economy for sure, but it's also, it hits our budget. So I think, we will have to monitor. I think before this week, I hadn't actually heard the word recession, and now they're, the economists are talking potential recession. So, we'll have to monitor it.
Great, thank you.
All right, Bonnie, do you have anything you want to add?
No, I think these are prudent and creative changes to the budget. I completely agree with, I think, everybody that we're going to have to keep an eye on, on how this affects the beach. I mean, I guess I could make the argument that going to the beach is one of the safest places you could go because you're in the open air. But, we're clearly going to have some kind of hit. I mean, I live, as everybody knows, I live right on Savannah Road, and so I have kind of a sense of traffic. And it's remarkable how quiet the town is right now, at least judged by looking out the window on Savannah Road. So, yeah, I mean, I think we are going to have to keep an eye on this. I look forward to working with the Chamber of Commerce they can give us a sort of steady pulse of what's going on. But I think all of that said, it's a responsible budget, and we've leveraged the reserves in the sense of the accumulated transfer taxes, et cetera, appropriately, and that we should proceed.
I would suggest that we look at the budget in terms of what new expenditures could be delayed by a couple of months or put off till the summer or whatever, so that you would have some maneuverability within the budget as you look at the impact on our economy. So there may be some things that we don't have to do immediately, but we could put it off.
Yep.
And I would simply look to you to make that decision in terms of what you can postpone for a short period of time or what you need to do right away.
With our budget not starting until April 1,
Yeah.
I think that's going to happen automatically in some ways.
Yeah.
I mean, there isn't a huge amount of stuff that gets done, and then, because we usually try to curtail larger projects through the summer months anyway, so just by natural.
Yeah, I understand that, but.
Okay.
Can I make one other point?
Sure.
As everybody knows, for the past few years, Ellen Lorraine has heroically put together a letter that explains, or a memo that explains the differences budget year over budget year. One of the things we might want to put in that memo, just for making a record, is the advent of the pandemic, and how that, just to pick up on what Fred's saying, so that we keep our records kind of like somebody looking back on this later can say, oh yeah, that was hopefully the short-lived pandemic of 2020.
I think we could
Just
put.
a suggestion.
I think it's a good suggestion. I think we could put something into the effect that, given the uncharted waters the city, that the whole country is facing, we may be back to revise this budget as necessary.
Yeah.
You agree with that kind of a comment, Bonnie?
Sorry for the delay, I've been putting it on and off of mute. Oh, absolutely, and I want to credit Anne Marie and Ellen Lorraine for putting us on a regular schedule of amending the budget as required, because that gives us a good sense of the rhythm, and it's been an important and I think very useful initiative. So.
Okay, great.
Yep.
Okay, well, so I think at this point, we could entertain a motion to approve this budget. So in spite of the fact we're shutting down meetings, the city does have to go on, and now that we're not going to have more meetings until after the 1st of April, the new beginning of the new fiscal year, we do need to approve this budget if everyone is in agreement, or if we have agreement here. So I would entertain a motion to approve the budget. We have a motion, do we have a second? Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
Thank you. So You can function into the new year. So,
Thank you.
Item 4 on the agenda does involve contract negotiation, and I've had a request from a member of council that we move this item to an executive session, and I would suggest that we do that if at all possible. Anne Marie, do you have any problem with that?
No, I think it's allowable as an executive session item.
Okay, so thank you all for coming this morning. We'll take a short break here, and Bonnie, if you'll stay on the line, we'll be right back with that. Everyone else, we thank you for your participation.
Okay, I'll be here.
Okay, and we'll look forward to getting this under control, but I think everyone needs to be as prudent as possible. So, motion to go into executive session, please. Second? Okay, all in favor? Great, thanks.
Ted, we're reconvening here.
Actually, maybe.
We got Bonnie
We got
here.
We got Bonnie here. She could hang up and we could go move in the other room. That might